It's kind of one of those touchy subjects in the industry.
We don't want to be everything to everybody. The Foxy brand can't be everything to everybody.
Hi, my name is Jake, and today I'm going to talk about building and growing a home staging business if we were to start again from scratch, and some of the things we might do differently, do the same, just talk about some of the learnings. So some of the things that we're going to cover are what business model you might want to think about when you're starting out a home staging business, how to get your first job in the early days, what you might want to focus on more, versus what can wait until a bit later, and what might seem important but probably isn't. And then we're also going to talk about some of the other details that both Phoebe and I have kind of picked up along the way. So we're going to cover all of this in today's episode 178 of Foxy TV. We first created a video like this about 2 years ago, and since that time we've gone from about 7 staff to 25-ish. We've gone from 1 truck to 3. We're in a nice big warehouse compared to the one we were in before, and we have about 160, 170 houses worth of stock versus at the time 2 years ago we had about 35 or 40. So there's been a lot of growth. So yeah, we're going to touch on what has changed. We're going to go into a bit more detail soon in this episode, but for now, I guess just as a starting point, some of the things that come to mind when I think about starting a business, both from our experience in doing so, but also watching other people starting in this industry and some of the questions that get asked. The first thing that comes to mind is just get in and do it. There's a lot of, I'll call it procrastinating. It's not always procrastinating, but it's focusing on some of those things like, spending a bit too much time on getting your website perfect, getting your logo perfect, getting your pitch right. Yes, those things are important. Yes, you need to be able to point somebody to, a place where you've got some pictures and you've got, details about yourself, all that sort of thing. So it is important to have those things, but not if it means you're spending all your time on that before you actually go and speak to people. You need to be ringing agents, you need to be talking to people in the industry, you need to be learning, you need to be trying to get that first bit of work, because you can read about it, you can talk to people about what you're going to do when you get that first staging job, but really there's no teacher like actually getting in and doing it. So now I've kind of got that little intro and my first thoughts out of the way. Let's get into a bit more detail with Phoebe and with myself on how to, a bit more specifics, how we got our first job, what you need to do in those as a first steps.
Basically how I did was to make a whole heap of phone calls and say hi to everybody, introduce our business to them. I didn't want to step on toes. I wasn't there to I wasn't a sales pitch at any point. It was just to say hi. From that point, we had people ring us back and book in jobs. So that's the sort of flow that happened. Given the opportunity, wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't do it any different again. When we're low on jobs, so for example, this week we're a little bit slower, I'm on the phone. I'm ringing people going, hey, just checking in, seeing how everything's going. We've been here for a while. Wanted to let you know what we've got, how we're doing things differently. I'm not stepping on anybody's toes. I just want to be a backup option. So everybody during the busy peak periods needs a backup option. And if that's how we're introduced to them as a business, it's fantastic. Rewind back 5 years, I just wanted to be a backup option. And that's exactly how we've grown. Yeah, so that is a tricky one. And I've spoken about this before. Use the fact that you don't have experience to let them know that you are new, you are enthusiastic, you're motivated. Your greenness in the industry can be a huge positive. They might be working with stylists who are becoming complacent, who have been so busy, they are now in this stage of, and I spoke about this the other day, default thinking. They aren't really thinking about how they can improve their processes. They might have had their stock now for about a year, they've seen all the stock come out and rotate out, but they haven't had the funds there to update and get new fresh pieces. So maybe they're tired of seeing the same being produced every time. Perhaps their communication isn't on point. Perhaps them as an agency, perhaps they've grown and the stylist hasn't grown with them. There are so many different scenarios that a relationship the stylist has with an agent, that they outgrow each other, and it's always a great opportunity for somebody to come in and say, look, I'm new, I'm different, tell me what you need, tell me what you like, tell me how you operate, and then I'll let you know if I can sit and fit with that. It works really, really well. You don't need to necessarily have that experience or the portfolio behind you. Focus on business mindset. That is the biggest reason I feel that we as a business have grown. You need to have an understanding of customer service. You need to understand the importance of communication. You need to understand basic principle of business relationships. And that is exactly how you will have a business that is going to grow. You also obviously need to have an understanding of styling. You need to know your numbers behind your business. But as far as that, if you've got those all in place, you can go out and get your first job. You need to do the right thing by your vendors. If you're by your clients, if you can't do a job to its best capacity, don't take it on. Don't quote on it if you don't have the right stock to style that home. And if you do the right thing by everybody and they love the job that you make, the product, the outcome that you produce, that's how you build your business. Don't hold off trying to find those right vendors. Don't hold off until you feel like you've got the right marketing. Don't hold off until you've got your business motto and your business plan written. Don't hold off until you feel like you've got that education behind you. There's nothing better than going out and actually doing it. Just make sure that you have the right stock to do it. There's a lot of thought process that goes behind those numbers. So if you don't know those numbers, if you don't know that I am happy to spend $1,200 on a sofa because you're going to hire it out at $350 per week when it is hired, which means that it's going to pay itself out on an average of 3 installs. If you don't know the same like how it equates across every single piece of furniture and accessory item, artwork and fluff piece that you use, then you're not going to be charging the client the right amount for you then to become profitable. At the very, very start, it's not about profit. But if you set a precedence on how much you're going to charge a client and you have an agent who comes and they love what you've done for the price you've done it, it's then really, really tricky to change that pricing significantly to make you become profitable. So unless you're upfront about that at the very start.
I'll give my thoughts as well. So from a pricing point of view, it's kind of one of those touchy subjects in the industry. I don't think anybody really puts as much thought into it maybe as they need to, including us. When you're hiring furniture, you're driven a little bit by what they're charging you and being able to charge something on top of that to make your, to cover your other costs. What I would say is there's too many factors, hiring furniture, where you're located, what your competitors are doing. It really comes down to being deliberate or thoughtful about it. Don't just pick a price based on what somebody else is doing. Don't just pick a price necessarily based on your cost of hiring furniture. Those things have to be factored in, but I think it's just a case of be thoughtful about it and where you want to sit in the market. I don't think it's as simple as, I hear people say things like, charge what you're worth, your time is worth money. And while I don't disagree with it, at the same time, it's not as simple as that. When you're starting out, the market is the market. The market will pay you what the market thinks you're worth. So it's not as easy as saying, well, I'm worth more, so I'll charge more. You have to be able to prove it. You have to go and get the work. If no one's paying you at the price you want to charge, then the market is telling you that your services either aren't worth that or you need to get better at selling what it is you can do or talking about it, showing what value you bring. We're at a point now where when Phoebe buys furniture, she buys specific pieces she needs. She goes and buys 10 sets of occasionals or 10 sofas or whatever it is. At the start of a business like this, when you're staging one house, obviously you need one house worth of furniture. The question we get asked is one enough? When do I get the second? How do I do that basically? How do I start up and have the stock I need? My first answer isn't going to suit everybody, but it is what we did. I would absolutely do it again. We hired what we could. So we had a couple of options, but one that we used locally in Brisbane. Pabs, I know they're in Sydney. I know there's Domain. I know there's a bunch. And depending on where you are, you hopefully will have options for hiring. I would 100% recommend doing that because what it does is it lets you start. It lets you say yes to work even though you might not have the furniture purchased. It means that you don't necessarily have that giant capital outlay that it might cost you to get a house worth of furniture or 5 houses if that's how quickly you want to ramp up. So what we did is we started buying furniture as cash was available and then we filled the gaps with hired furniture. So we always used ours as a priority, obviously because then we don't have to pay for the hired furniture. What we didn't want to do is say no to those early relationships that we were trying to build, especially because at the beginning you work so hard to get those first relationships, those first few jobs. The last thing you want to do is say, sorry, I can't do that because I've just done one last week and I need to wait for it to come back for my next set of furniture. Yeah, that's my first answer is use hire furniture where you can and use the cash to build up your inventory as you go. That took us 3 years until we had enough. We were at the scale where the furniture we were buying had caught up to the level of business we were doing. So we hired furniture for 3 years, or pieces of furniture. If you're in a regional area, I know some places don't have that option and that's unfortunate. I don't think there's a good answer other than you might have to be either, if you don't have the capital to go out and buy 5 or 10 houses worth at the beginning, you just might have to be a bit more deliberate about how you scale. So you might not be able to take on that extra work. So what you're trying to, the relationships you're building, the work you're trying to look for, you just might have to be a bit more deliberate about how you scale that and how you bring it in. You don't want 10 jobs up front if you only have 5 houses worth of furniture.
There are so many different options you can go down. We started out in the model of hiring our furniture. I then purchased all the smaller pieces that could fit into the car. So at the very start, I was just doing it by myself in our little kind of big iX35. I would take all of the pieces that could fit in the back seat, literally took out the kids' car seats every single day, fill it up. I could fit a 4-bedroom, 2 living area house in the backseat of that car when it came to artwork, accessories and linen. And then I'd install it, come back, install 2 car seats, happy days. When we started to grow, we recognized that for us to have more profitability, we needed to own the stock. So that's when we started to buy the bigger inventory items. I was very slow to come to the party on wholesaling partnerships. So I would pay the prices more so from a retail point of view. And it wasn't until I really went down to the Decor and Design trade fair. No, I went to Reed Gift Fair. Down in Melbourne, the second year that we were in, that I was introduced to this world of wholesale, and it was a game changer for me. So we now have amazing relationships with a number of wholesalers across Brisbane and Australia, and they are fantastic in getting me our stock very quickly at a very amazing price. The more that you purchase from them, the better they are looking after us as well as relationships with upholsterers who can get us our sofas within 3 weeks. The more you work on those relationships, the better they look after you. So not everybody can get what we get as quick as we get when it comes to sofas. That's really beneficial. As far as style, you've really got to figure out what you want to do as a business. So we basically service everybody sub $2 million. If you come to me and you've got an integrated home and you've got a retro feel, we have pieces that will work with that. If you've got a brand new, contemporary new build, we've got pieces that will work with that. If you've got a $6 million high level penthouse that you would like done, we're not really going to be the stylist for you. I would most likely pass it on to a stylist in Brisbane who's going to do a better job at presenting that home to the level that it's worth. Their decisions and I guess realizations that I've come to after 5 years, that we don't want to be everything to everybody. The Foxy brand can't be everything to everybody because then you become less valuable. But that was a learning that took 5 years to figure out. I believe that you do not actually really need a formal qualification in design to get started in this particular industry. Interior design is completely different to property styling, and I think that's a definition that we need to make. Interior design, absolutely 100%, you need to have those ideas, understandings, and your own opinions on what works best so you can advise a client how they're best going to be able to get the most out of their home. But especially when you're advising on colours and finishes and surfaces and textures, all those sorts of things that somebody's going to want to bring and live and love their home. Property styling's different. We're there for first impressions. We're there to maximise profit out of the sale of an asset, and we're there to make a profit marketable and getting the most profit from it. That doesn't necessarily equate to needing the best feng shui. It doesn't mean that we need the best color cohesion, all those sorts of things that come down to interior design. They are separate. So I don't feel you need the education or background. I didn't. I had a business mindset, had understanding of customer service, and I had a degree in radiation therapy. So I guess my experience in renovations definitely helped. But yeah, honestly, I'm a people person, Jake's a numbers person. Together we've made this.
What I would say there is there's no simple answer as in, 10 houses worth of stock, you go to the next site's warehouse, anything like that. For us, what I would say is it comes down to use what you have available to you until it doesn't work anymore, or until it starts to hinder you in what you're doing. So we used our garage for a while until very quickly we realised we didn't have space for the smaller furniture. We went to storage sheds at Storage King or National Storage, something like that. We did that until we got to about 6 storage sheds, and logistically trying to find where the furniture was and get it in and out became a nightmare. And at that point, the cost of those 6 storage sheds wasn't too different to a small warehouse, so that's when we moved. And then again, we moved to this bigger one when we got to a point where, or like a level of business where we just didn't have enough room in the other one, and it was becoming difficult to get stuff in and out again. So obviously cost is important, and depending on your location, the cost will be different. But the simple answer, which isn't so simple, is use what you've got until it doesn't work anymore. I don't think, as an overhead cost, a decent kind of chunk of your money in the early days as well. Don't spend too much on a warehouse space if you don't need it. You're always, we moved into this one and we looked at them and signed a 5-year lease and said, this is huge, this is going to be fine. 2 years in, we've had to expand next door, and we're already looking at this space going, how long are we going to last here? So I think it's easy to look at a big one and go, that'll do us for a long time. It's not as simple as that. Logistics, so your trucks, your logistics people, your team, almost everybody, including us, has no, there's no justification for bringing a truck in-house when you start out. You don't have the need for it. It's not going to be, you have a need for it, but it's not going to be full-time. You don't have enough work to justify the expense of the people more than anything, but obviously the truck as well costs. You'll outsource that, you'll find a removalist company, you'll find someone locally that can do it. Maybe if you're hiring furniture, they can deliver it for you. There's a point where, as a business like this, logistics, really our business is based on or built on logistics and how good we are at coordinating the moving of furniture around. So it's so important that my personal belief is that when you get to a scale that justifies it, it should be an in-house function. You can't rely on other companies being as flexible as you want to be, being as reliant as you want to be, both in terms of timing and turning up, but also looking after your furniture. And the cost can actually be quite significant as well. So in terms of when to do that, again, it kind of comes down to how much are you spending on an outside contractor to do it versus what would you spend if you're doing it in-house, and what does doing it in-house offer you in terms of flexibility and reliability, and how much work do you have for, say, a truck and 2 guys? Can you actually fill in most of a day 5 days a week? And if so, then for me it's a no-brainer. Not a small cost, and I know that that's one that people get caught up on. I think personally, and I've kind of talked about this in the past and written some articles about it, for me it is such an important function to a home staging business who is having a warehouse in your own stock. It is so important to your the deliverability, how good your service is, that it has to be an in-house function when you're capable from a cost point of view of doing so.
I wouldn't start out differently, but given time again to build to where we've gotten now, I think I would place far more emphasis on implementing structure and processes a lot earlier than what we have. So being a smaller team, it didn't feel like we needed to have written out guidelines and processes. It just felt like it was too structured and too much for what we needed. Then we had this period of growth, and now we're at 21 employees, actually 23 as of today. And we are in a position where we do need those written down structures and strategies. And we had all the time to be able to write down the structures and strategies 2 years ago, and didn't appreciate what that could have helped us with and what it would help us achieve now. So 100% would place more focus on that. I would definitely still focus on team culture. I think that's one of our biggest pluses and our biggest benefits as a team. In an environment now in a society where I'm seeing with post-COVID, where there is so many issues with staff retention and getting staff in even to start with, our team have stayed with us the entire time. They're absolutely phenomenal, and we really try to look after them in the same respect. So you can't do that without an awesome team culture. So that is something I wouldn't change. And I think doing it with Jake, I think that was he came in at the right start. Everyone always asks me about partnerships and stuff like that, and I think doing it with Jake's been fantastic. We don't, adverse to what some people might think, I don't even see Jake most days. He's not even here today. But it's been awesome to be able to do it and share it with Jake and see something that we've grown.
Thanks for watching this week's episode. I hope you found it helpful. I'm sure we didn't answer everything, so I do have a question, a favour to ask of you guys. We do get questions from those in the industry or those looking to join the industry from time to time, and we try and answer them and be as helpful as we can. My favour today is, if you've watched this whole episode and you found it useful and there's some gaps there, please reach out to us. We would love to hear more questions. We want to know what sort of things we haven't answered, what things you need to know more about if you're either in the industry or thinking about joining. So please leave a comment. We're on all the social media platforms, so whichever one suits you, whatever your preference is, please reach out and ask some questions. We're not to kind of toot our own horn, we are one of the biggest staging companies in Australia in terms of the volume and the kind of scale that we're at. So, from a personal point of view, we feel like we have something to offer, and we want to do that. So again, please reach out and ask questions. Otherwise, thank you for watching this episode. I appreciate you watching through to the end. We'll see you next week. Sorry, I waffled a bit there. Shut up. Yeah.